Peter Aldous.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Energy production, either offshore in the form of oil and gas production and offshore wind, or on the coast in the form of nuclear, is of specific interest to the Waveney constituency that I represent. The oil and gas industry has been a significant employer locally for nearly 60 years. One of the largest clusters of offshore wind farms in the world is located off the East Anglian coast, and Sizewell C will bring significant job-creating opportunities to the area. To realise the full potential of these opportunities, both nationally and locally, we need the right policy, fiscal and regulatory frameworks which satisfy the three criteria of energy security, affordability and decarbonisation. It is also necessary to provide investors with the confidence and certainty to invest in the UK. It should be borne in mind that the market for energy capital is global, footloose and highly competitive. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's against this backdrop that we should judge this bill. There are reasons for supporting it, but we must not lose sight of the need for long-term stability and consistency in energy policy that is required to attract the enormous amount of private investment that we require to modernise and decarbonise our energy system and to make it more secure and resilient. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I chair the all-party parliamentary group for offshore oil and gas, and I highlight three factors that I believe should be borne in mind in setting energy policy. Firstly, we are moving away from businesses, wherever they are in the supply chain, which specialise in a particular sector, whether that is oil and gas, offshore wind, carbon capture or hydrogen. These businesses are increasingly becoming all energy companies that work in a range of different sectors. Secondly, as I've mentioned, many of these businesses are globally footloose and will operate anywhere in the world. If we have policy, regulatory and fiscal regimes which are continuously flip-flopping, they will go elsewhere. Thirdly, it should be emphasised that the vast majority of these companies, and I would highlight those operating in East Anglia, they are committed to net zero. They regard it as both a moral and a legal obligation from which we should not be distracted. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I've mentioned, there are reasons to support this bill, and I shall briefly highlight them. Firstly, our energy policy is determined by the trinity of energy security, affordability and decarbonisation. Recent geopolitical events, in particular the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East, have created major concerns with regard to security of supply and unpredictability of price. We have felt the backlash of the latter very harshly in the past 2 years, and its impact hits hardest the poorest and most vulnerable. It is against this backdrop that it is sensible for the UK to be more energy independent and to use our own energy supplies, whether that is offshore wind, nuclear or oil and gas. Secondly, we do need to be reducing our reliance on oil and gas, and indeed we have made good progress in doing this, as the UK has decreased oil production by 66% since 2003. At the turn of the century, we were producing 4.5 million barrels of oil equivalent per day. Today, it is below 1.5 million and still falling. However, we do still rely on oil and gas for much of our energy needs, and we shall continue to do so, albeit on a significantly declining trajectory in the coming decades. It is in this context that it is logical to use our own oil and gas. It should be pointed out, as others have done, that the carbon footprint of domestic gas production is around a quarter of that associated with imported and energy-intensive liquefied natural gas. Thirdly, at a time of global economic uncertainty, as well as geopolitical instability, we do need to have in mind the huge benefits that the oil and gas industry brings to our country. Domestic oil and gas production provides many jobs and adds approximately £16 billion to the UK economy each year, whilst tax receipts are significant, £33.7 billion since 2010, and an estimated £50 billion over the next 5 years. Fourthly, as I've mentioned, today's energy companies operate across a variety of sectors, and there is a risk that if we close down the North Sea too quickly, we will imperil investment in new low-carbon sectors. Many companies investing in nascent opportunities require a cash flow from a stable and predictable oil and gas business. Moreover, freedom to explore can be a major driver for investment on the UK continental shelf, not only in oil and gas fields, but also in carbon capture and hydrogen production. Closing the door on exploration reduces the option value of the UK as a destination for overall investment. Finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it should be pointed out that most of the new licences that would be granted would be near fields adjoining existing ones. This means that there will be a lower incremental emission intensity as production will take place using existing facilities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's important to emphasise that this bill is not a panacea for the future of the North Sea. There is other work that the government must carry out alongside it. One of the most notable achievements of the Conservative government in recent years was the creation in 2016 of the Oil and Gas Authority, which now operates as the North Sea Transition Authority. It is a regulatory authority which has achieved a great deal and which has recognised the vital importance of net zero. The NSTA's great advantage of its predecessor, which was embedded in the Department of Energy and Climate Change, is its independence of government. There is a worry, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this bill undermines that independence, and I do hope that my right honourable friend, the Minister, in his summing up, can take on board and allay this concern. The government should also consider providing the NSTA with an enhanced role. As the transition has become centre stage to the authority's work, they have taken on additional regulatory responsibilities for CCUS and hydrogen. Consideration should be given to adding to this the oversight of the emerging geothermal sector and an increased focus on the offshore energy supply chain and maximising the future use by low-carbon technologies of the infrastructure that has been laid down in the North Sea over the past 60 years. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are at times in danger of talking glibly about a just transition and the creation of new jobs. We can help achieve this in a meaningful way by focusing more strategically on skills and infrastructure. I'm also mindful that the regulatory space on the UK continental shelf is a crowded one. As well as the NSTA, there are other organisations such as the Marine Management Organisation and the Crown Estate carrying out important work. We must make sure that all of this work is properly coordinated, is effective in its precautionary objectives, and is not overly bureaucratic so as to deter investment. I've mentioned that the majority of businesses working in the North Sea are committed to the transition. Yes, they want the government to be realistic and pragmatic about the future of domestic oil and gas industry, but they are also ambitious. They want to be part of an industry that is in the vanguard of the transition from fossil fuels to renewables, global leaders on the road to net zero. For example, this should mean a more ambitious climate compatibility checkpoint and bringing forward the ban on routine venting and flaring. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, this bill does have merit, but it does need to be accompanied by other measures, some of which I have outlined, so as to maximise the enormous amount of private investment that is required to decarbonise, and also we need this to dispel any notion among investors as to the UK's commitment to delivering our net zero targets. As the government has stated, there is a need for pragmatism, proportionality and realism. But this must be accompanied by ambition, consistency and clarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah